Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the last video in our series of Edge of Eternities Commander deck techs. Since EOE is Magic's last in-universe set for 2025, I wanted to showcase some of the cool Commander options that it's given us beyond just the ones in the precons. I've released a new Edge of Eternities Commander deck every Thursday through now, September, when the Spider-Man set is ready to drop, in addition to my usual Monday Commander deck tech videos. So if you'd like to see what I came up with, feel free to check out the playlist in the description below for all of my Edge of Eternities Commander deck techs. As you see, today, our commander is Sami, Wildcat Captain. As their epithet says, Sami is a Wildcat, a freelancer who takes whatever jobs they can get in their ship, the Sarima. Sami and their first mate, Tanuk, for whom I posted a deck 2 weeks ago, see the link in the description, are searching for Sami's lost cat when they're contacted by Tezzeret to travel to the abandoned mining colony of Sigma's Reach. This is the quest that begins the entire EOE story, at least from our perspective. The Endstone, of course, sees things very differently. I'm linking the story in the description below because it's just so good. But for now, before we get into the deck tech, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build around my commander. I want to show off why they're cool and why I put them in the command zone. So whatever they want me to do, I'm putting 30 cards toward that. That's our game plan, it's what we're going to do at the table, and how we try to win. I also put 30 cards toward these 3 categories of support: card advantage, acceleration, and interaction. I will run 1 to 2 sweepers, sometimes more if it would feed my game plan, sometimes none if that would help. But I almost always keep this floor of 38 lands, so I can make sure that the spells in my hand can get onto the stack. So let's take a look at our commander. Sami Wildcat Captain is a 4/4 legendary human artificer rogue for 4, a red, and a white. Sami has double strike and vigilance, and spells you cast have affinity for artifacts. That's all spells you cast. This is crazy. If you haven't seen affinity before, what that means is for every artifact we control, each of our spells costs a generic mana less to cast. So this really accelerates us once we have plenty of artifacts in play. And even without that, Sami is still a 4/4 double striking vigilance for 6 mana. That's pretty great. So as much as the story focuses on Sami's bravery and pluck, they aren't just the Sarima's captain, they have the artificer subtype because they're also the ship's engineer. They started off as a scrapper and a mechanic, and those skills have never gone away. They love tinkering. It's why the uncommon version of Sami produces little robot tokens. They literally have an affinity for artifacts. Imagine serving on a spacecraft. You're at the helm, doing your job. Maybe you need to report some readings to your CO's quarters. You knock on their door, and when it opens, you see your captain chilling on their bunk with their cat nearby as they fiddle with a new robot buddy. You don't know if this is an automaton they're working on that'll make your life on the ship easier, maybe helping the star drive or the sensors or the galley's dispensers function properly. Or maybe it's one more round bumbling little what's-it, like the ones you keep running into in the corridors, toddling along busily on a questionable, inscrutable, quote-unquote, mission. And then trouble arrives. Maybe your ship gets seized or attacked, and the borders appear wrested away from you. This is your home, and as weird and cramped as it is, you're willing to fight to avoid losing it. You grab your weapon, improvised or not, and suddenly your captain is there, moving with a speed and fluidity you would not have expected. They're armed, but they don't reach for their ray blade. Instead, they're throwing little robots the size of grapefruits, just taking these invaders out. The little bots you've seen them make are suddenly everywhere, underfoot and underestimated, moving like a midnight drone show as their coordinated attacks protect their creator and their crew. In seconds, the battle is over, and when your captain sees you're safe, they grin like a little kid as their bots beep and boop happily around them. You're saved, thanks to their robot friends. You'll enjoy this deck if you like explosive turns, punctuated by combat victories, or if you like just swinging in with a big team that only gets bigger and better as the game goes on. So, as usual, this Moxfield list is linked in the video's description below. At the bottom of the Moxfield list, below the deck, you will see the considering section, which shows a lot of cards that I thought about including and chose not to, but they might be a good place for you to start if you have a bigger budget, or maybe even a smaller one, or if you want to focus a little differently than what I did on Sami Wildcat Captain here. So let's start by just mentioning that I have 15 cheap artifacts. These are all artifacts that cost between 0 and 2 mana, We're not going to talk about them right now. We'll get into them in a moment. But because they're so cheap, they reduce things easily when Sami is out. They reduce the cost of things thanks to Sami's giving all of our spells affinity. Having these cheap artifacts is really helpful to us, which is why we've put a little emphasis on it in this deck. But we're going to actually start with our real game plan, which is our friends. These are all artifact creatures. As you can see, we're running 53 artifacts in this deck, so affinity is going to go just bonkers with us. But 30 of them are artifact creatures, and we've got plenty of creature tokens coming up as well. We're going to start here, though, with Clowncar. Clowncar is from Unfinity, and it's great in this deck. It costs X, which means we decide what we're going to have that X represent, and then we pay that much mana of, any sort. Which then, that amount we are supposed to pay is reduced before we pay it by the affinity total that we have. So if we have 4 artifacts in play already, and we want X to be 5, we only have to pay 1 mana. If we want X to be 4, we don't have to pay any, assuming affinity is happening. So that's why X spells are great in this kind of deck. Well, what does Clowncar actually do? Well, it's a vehicle, which is an artifact, which of course adds to our affinity count, and it crews for 2. And when it enters, we roll a number of 6-sided dice equal to X. It's however much we paid or would have paid thanks to affinity, or whatever combination of the two. For each odd result on those dice, we make a 1/1 white clown robot artifact creature token. So it's a 1/1 clown bot. It's an artifact, so it adds to our affinity total. And for every even result on those dice, we put a 1/1 counter on Clowncar. So that means Clowncar can get kind of big. I mean, with the amount of mana we're going to be producing and the amount of affinity we're going to have, Clowncar might come out and X might be 12, which means we roll 12 6-sided dice, and even results mean we're getting about 6 1/1 robots that are all artifacts that all add to our affinity count, and we're getting 6 counters on it. So it's a 7/7 vehicle that crews for 2. At the very least, that's 1 more artifact, the Clowncar, that will add to our affinity, and we can crew it for 2, which most of our creatures can be, or maybe just 2 of our little clown robots can do that, and block with a 7/7 creature if we're not planning to attack with it. Clowncar is great the more you can pump into it. The same is true, I'm going to go ahead and talk about Stonecoil Serpent, because it also is an artifact creature for X. I guess it's a creature, not a vehicle. So we have the same things going on with the casting cost of X here that we had with Clowncar, but we're putting it into 1/1 counters that go directly onto our 0/0 creature. So whatever we want the power and toughness to be, that's what our X is going to be, and that gets paid for with whatever mana we want to put into it, then reduced by, that number reduced by the affinity number. But Stonecoil Serpent, what does it actually do? It is a reach, trample, and protection from multicolored 0/0 with all those counters on it. So it has reach, so we can block well with it, and it's probably going to be big. It has trample, so we can attack well with it, especially when it's going to be big. And it has protection from multicolored. What does protection mean? We use the word DEBT, D-E-B-T, as the acronym for how protection works. Protection prevents this creature from being damaged, enchanted or equipped, blocked, or targeted by whatever it has protection from, which in this case is multicolored spells and permanents. So if we attack with a Stonecoil Serpent, it cannot be blocked by any kind of multicolored creature. If it is targeted by a spell, it can't be targeted by a multicolored spell. It's got to be a monocolored spell. If someone decides to attack us and they're attacking with a multicolored creature, we can block it and we won't take any damage from it. Stonecoil Serpent is great in so many different ways, just when we pump so much mana into it. And we're going to have so much mana to pump into it thanks to affinity. Marketback Walker works similarly, but a little different, because its cost is double X. So the number we're putting into this has got to be an even number, essentially, because if we make X 1, then we would have to put 2 mana into it. If X is 2, we'd be putting 4 mana into it total. That total number is what is decreased by our affinity count. So if we have an affinity of 3, let's say, and we wanted to make X equal 2, we would have a total casting cost of 4 reduced by the affinity number of 3, so we'd pay 1 into it, and Marketback Walker would come in with X equals 2. which is to say it comes in with X 1/1 counters on it because it's a 0/0 creature. For 4 generic, we can put a 1/1 counter on it, and when it dies, we get to draw a card for every counter that was on it. Pretty simple. Good way for us to get card draw. We have several different ways to sacrifice our creatures, but we may not need to. We might want to just have this out there and keep putting counters on it and attack or block with it. I do want to make mention, however, that this is an activated ability. This is the casting cost of the spell. We cannot use affinity to reduce this number because Sami only gives affinity to our spells, not to the activated abilities that our permanents have. Just worth noting. We still have to pay the 4. Next up, we have Slag Drill Scrapper. This is one of our 1 mana spells. It's important to remember the 1 mana ones, and you'll see why soon. For a single red, we get a 1/2 artifact creature robot scout, so it's actually a robot that only has 1 ability. For 2 and tap, we can sacrifice another artifact or a land to draw a card. So this is a great way for us to turn our artifacts or our artifact tokens. If we don't need them, we can just turn them into card draw something different. Sometimes that's worth it. Sometimes we maybe just have a treasure token and we don't need the mana because we have so much affinity and we've got plenty of lands out, let's say. So we can just go ahead and pay 2, tap, and sacrifice that artifact to draw a card. Slag Drill Scrapper is an excellent sack outlet for us. Securitron Squadron is next. This is from the Fallout decks. Really cool card. 1 and a white for a 2/2 artifact creature robot that has vigilance, and whenever a creature token we control enters, put a 1/1 counter on it. That's a little specific, and the reason it is because it also has Squad for 3 generic mana. What that means is, as an additional cost, we can pay the Squad cost of 3 any number of times, and when the creature enters, we make that many tokens that are copies of it. So it's sort of like multi-kicker. The way it would work is we would say, Squad, we want to pay that, let's say 2 times. So that's going to be a total of 6 mana for the Squad, plus 1 and a white, for a total of 7 and a white. That total number is then reduced by our affinity. So if our affinity is 6, because we have 6 artifacts in play, all we have to do is pay the 1 and a white, and it's still been squatted, I guess you'd call it, twice. What that looks like is this. It enters, and then it makes 2 copies of itself that are tokens. Those copies enter, and the original Securitron Squadron will see them enter and put 1/1 counters on them. They will also see each other enter and put a 1/1 counter on each other, and they will see themselves enter and also put a counter on themselves, because creatures see themselves enter. Otherwise, Ender's effects wouldn't work. It's sort of like when this creature enters, do a thing. It has to see itself do that. So that means when the Securitron Squadron comes in, and then 2 tokens, they're going to end up being 2/2s with 3 counters on them each. That only gets better as the squad goes up. So we're incentivized to play as much of a squad as we can and let that all be reduced by our affinity. Great way to do it. And remember, all of these tokens, plus the original, are artifacts. So they add to our affinity count once they're in play. Next, we have Steel Overseer, a classic. For 2 generic mana, it's a 1/1 artifact creature construct with the ability to tap and put a 1/1 counter on each artifact creature we control. We can do this at instant speed. So maybe we make an attack with our artifacts, our artifact creatures that is, our opponents block in a way that seems pretty good, and then suddenly our team gets 1 bigger when the Steel Overseer gets tapped. We can also do this, of course, when it doesn't have summoning sickness, on the end step of our opponent to the right before they pass the turn to us. We just hold it up, we wait to use it, and at the last minute, we can go ahead and use it if we didn't need it any other time. Steel Overseer is here to help all of our friends. Zookeeper Mechan is next. This is 1 and a red for a 1/3 artifact creature robot that just taps to add red mana. It's just a mana dork. That's great. In addition, for 6 and a red, we can give a target creature +4/+0 until end of turn as a sorcery. This does not cause the Zookeeper Mechan to tap. So if we have 14 mana, 2 of which are red, we can do that twice, just sorcery speed both times. Zookeeper Mechan only has its colorless mana, or its generic mana cost reduced by affinity, so it'll go down to just a red no matter what our affinity is, as long as it's more than 0. This can't be reduced, but we can sure make mana in other ways, which we will see soon. It's also worth noting, this, because it doesn't tap, we can take the Zookeeper Mechan, tap it for red, and use that red to pay for part of its ability. One last note, this is probably something we're going to be putting on our commander, because our commander is a 4/4 Vigilant Double Striker. Having them be an 8/4 Vigilant Double Striker is crazy. Next up, we have Brea's Apprentice. This is an artifact creature, because it looks like they are from Esper on Alara. 2 and a red for an artifact creature human artificer. It's another artificer. And when it enters, it makes a Thopter, a 1/1 flying colorless artifact creature token. It also says for tap and sacrifice an artifact, we get to choose to either exile the top card of our library, and until end of turn we can play that card, or one of our creatures gets +2/+0 until end of turn. It actually doesn't say one of our creatures, in fact. It says target creature, not target creature we control. So little tiny things like this can be helpful to us if we're politicking. Maybe we convince one of our opponents to attack a different opponent, and we say, if you do, we'll give you a pump on your creature, so maybe you do better damage, or maybe we do it before combat, so they're less likely to block, something like that. Probably we're going to use it for ourselves, and oftentimes we're going to be exiling or sacrificing an artifact token that we don't care that much about in order to get a little bit of virtual card advantage, or actual card advantage in the form of impulse draw. Next we have Liberator, Urza's Battle Thopter, such a cool card. From the Brothers' War. For 3 generic mana, we have a 1/2 legendary artifact creature, Thopter. This is a giant Thopter, dumping dudes out. Anyway, it has flash and it has flying, so we can flash this in, and maybe for free, because if our affinity is at least 3, if we have 3 other artifacts or more, and we have Sami in play, Liberator is a flash flying spell that we can cast without paying any mana for it. It also lets us cast colorless spells and artifact spells as though they had flash, so we can do that once Liberator's on the battlefield with any of our artifacts. And whenever we cast a spell, if the amount of mana spent to cast that spell is greater than Liberator's power, put a 1/1 counter on Liberator. So we need to be cognizant of how much mana we're actually spending. If we have a 7 mana artifact, but we're not paying any mana for it, then that's not going to help Liberator get any bigger. But over time, it probably will. Next, we have Stride Hanger Automaton. This is from the Aetherdrift Commander product. For 3 generic mana, we have a 1/4 artifact creature construct that gives all of our Thopters +1/+1. That's sweet. That applies to Liberator. Liberator is a Thopter, but also all of our Thopter tokens that we might be making. Which, speaking of which, if we make an artifact token of any sort, if an artifact token would be created under our control, or any amount of them, we make 1 more token, and it's a Thopter. That Thopter is going to be a 2/2 because of this first sort of Lord ability. So Stride Hanger Automaton is an artifact, adding to affinity, and every time we make artifact tokens, we'll also get an extra one, which is a Thopter, which again adds to our affinity. Thran Spider is next. This is a sweet card. For 3 generic mana, we get a 2/4 artifact creature Spider, maybe ready for the Spider-Man set. It has reach, like spiders should. And when this creature enters, you and target opponent each create a tapped Power Stone token. Now, what is a Power Stone? Power Stones are a token artifact, so of course they add to affinity. They can tap to make colorless mana that can't be spent to cast a non-artifact spell. What in the world does that mean? It means you can only cast spells using this mana if those spells have the artifact type. You can, however, use that mana for other things. For example, Thran Spider has an activated ability that costs 7 generic mana. You can use that Power Stone mana on that. So look at the top 4 cards of your library. It says, you may reveal an artifact card from among them, put it into your hand, and then put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So this is essentially drawing us a card. 53 of our cards in our deck are artifacts. If the Thran Spider's in play, that means we're down to 52, perhaps. But we're pretty likely to find one. So it is expensive, but it's expensive to draw a card, essentially, that we might be able to play for free right away. I think that's a pretty good trade-off, especially since we can use the Power Stone mana to activate this ability. Next up, we have Virulent Silencer. We have a plan A, plan B, and plan C in this deck. Plan A is, of course, attacking with our artifact creatures and just having a good time in combat. Plan B is using our double striking commander to win with commander damage. And plan C, we have a couple of cards that do poison damage. Hear me out. Virulent Silencer is 3 generic mana for an artifact creature robot assassin. So it is a robot, but it's a 2/3 that says whenever a non-token artifact creature you control deals combat damage to a player, that player gets 2 poison counters. And in case you haven't encountered poison before, anytime someone has 10 or more poison counters, they lose the game. So the Silencer makes it so all of our artifact creatures, as long as they aren't tokens, they're incredibly deadly. This is a great way for us to close games out, and that means that the Silencer is a removal magnet. People are going to be trying to kill this thing so they don't die from poison damage, because poison doesn't show up at a lot of tables. So being able to have this out is going to draw attention away from our commander and from other probably more dangerous creatures. Next, we have the Sad Robot. Solemn Simulacrum is a classic. 4 generic mana for a artifact creature golem. When it enters, we Rampant Growth. Search our library for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. When it dies, we can draw a card. We don't necessarily want it to die, but we have a few ways to sacrifice our artifacts. Maybe this chump blocks. Either way, we get to draw a card, but its best benefit is it gives us ramp. Not just in the form of this enters trigger, but it's an artifact, so it helps us with affinity. Traxos, Scourge of Krug is next. From originally Dominaria 2018. 4 generic mana for a legendary artifact creature construct with trample. It is a 7/7 trample, but it enters tapped, and it doesn't untap during our untap step. It does, however, untap whenever we cast a historic spell. Legendary spells are historic, sagas, which we don't have any of in this deck, are historic, but artifacts are also historic. So every time we tap one of or cast one of our artifacts, Traxos is going to untap. Maybe the turn after we play Traxos, we attack with it, trample in, maybe it lives, I hope it does, as a 7/7 trampler, and then we cast an artifact post-combat and it untaps, and we've got a great blocker. If we have Liberator out, maybe we do that on our opponent's turn, and suddenly Traxos is a surprise 7/7 blocker. That seems good too. Next up is Alabu, Ancient Witness, from, I think, the Lorehold commander decks originally. Lorehold from the Strixhaven Commander 21 decks. In any case, Alabu is 3, a red and a white for a 4/5 legendary artifact creature golem that says other artifact creatures you control have haste. All of our artifact creatures having haste? That seems strong, but it's not as strong as whenever one or more artifact creatures you control attack, Alabu deals X damage to any target and you scry X, where X is the number of tapped artifact creatures you control. So notice the difference. It triggers on attacks, but X is the number of tapped artifacts. So if we have artifacts we have tapped or can tap in order to gain other benefits, all we have to do is attack with one artifact creature and Alabu triggers, and we get to maybe destroy something, do X damage to that thing. Maybe we even kill an opponent with this or reduce their life quite a bit. And we also get a scry, so we can stack the top of our library to make sure we have exactly the things we're looking for. Alabu's terrific. And also gives these other artifact creatures haste. From the same deck, the Lorehold deck, we have Bronze Guardian. 4 and a white for a star 5 artifact creature golem with double strike. Bronze Guardian has Ward 2, which means if someone targets this, other than us, with a spell or ability, they have to pay 2 extra or we counter that spell or ability. That's important because Bronze Guardian gives all of our artifacts Ward 2. And its power is equal to the number of artifacts we control. So one more reason for us to keep a die out that shows what our affinity count is. So if we have, I don't know, let's say 8 artifacts, including the Bronze Guardian, this is an 8/5 double strike. It's another instance of double strike beyond just our commander. Very dangerous. If they want to remove it, they gotta pay the ward. If they want to remove any of our artifacts, they gotta pay the ward. Bronze Guardian's great in this deck. Next, we have Dark Steel Juggernaut. Oof, big boy. 5 generic mana for a star artifact creature Juggernaut with Indestructible. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of artifacts we control, so there's that affinity number again, and it attacks each combat if able. So if, again, including it, we have 8 artifacts, not unlikely, it's an 8/8 indestructible, attacking each combat if able. We can only block with this the turn after it comes down because of summoning sickness, but that's enough. Like, being able to see this keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, it's just very strong. We also have, oh, what a cool card from Dominaria 2018, Mishra's Self-Replicator. 5 generic mana for an artifact creature assembly worker. It's only a 2/2 for 5, but whenever we cast a historic spell, we can pay 1 generic mana, and if we do, we make a token that's a copy of the Self-Replicator. What that means is this: that triggered ability here is not casting a spell. It's not an additional cost, so we can't use affinity to reduce it. However, it's only 1 mana. We might have played the Self-Replicator for free because it doesn't have any colored mana in its cost, and maybe our affinity is already 5. So that means every time we cast a legendary or an artifact, or of course a saga, all we have to do is pay 1 mana, and we make an extra Self-Replicator, which adds to our affinity number. But then, let's say we've done that once. Now we have the original Self-Replicator and a copy of it. The next time we cast an artifact, both of those will trigger. We can pay 1 generic to both of them, and if we do, now we have 4 Self-Replicators, which is giving us a lot more affinity, and each of them still trigger every time we cast an artifact. This gives us a way for us to use our affinity reduction of costs very aggressively and hold back the mana that we have available from our lands and our mana rocks to pay for the Self-Replicators and end up with an army of 2/2s, all of which are making most of our artifacts free. Seems good. Next up is Artificer's Dragon. This one's great. 6 generic mana for a 4/4 artifact creature dragon with flying, and the coolest ability. For 1 red mana, artifact creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. This is team fire breathing for our artifact creatures. We only have to pay the red once, and all of our artifact creatures get the bonus to power until end of turn. So if we dump 5 red mana into this, every one of our artifact creatures has +5/+0 until end of turn. In addition, we have Unearth for 3 and double red. What that means is we can, at sorcery speed, when the Artificer's Dragon is in our graveyard, pay 3 and double red to bring the dragon back to the battlefield, and it gains haste. Then, at the end step, or when it would leave the battlefield for any other reason, we exile it. So we only get it back 1 more time, but that 1 more time is probably enough. And when we do that, this is not casting it, so it's not reduced by affinity. But if we have any red mana left over, let's just pump the team. What a cool card. I love Combustible Gearhulk. Probably put this in too many red decks, but it's always good. For 4 and double red, we have a 6/6 first striking artifact creature construct that says when it enters, one of our opponents may have us draw 3 cards, and if they don't, we mill 3 cards, and the Gearhulk will do damage to that player equal to the total mana value of the cards we milled. So either they are letting us get a free Ancestral Recall on top of our 6/6 first striker, or they're probably going to take a bunch of damage. Well, if they take a bunch of damage, that's okay with me. We still get our first striker. If we draw those cards, that's even better, because we might have only paid double red for this Gearhulk. We might have reduced its cost, thanks to affinity, by that much. Next is Ruin Grinder. This one and the next one are serving kind of similar roles in the deck, in a way. For 5 and a red, Ruin Grinder is an artifact creature construct, and I know I keep reading the type line beyond just the subtype, because I want to remind you all of these are artifacts, so all of them contribute to affinity. Ruin Grinder is a 7/4 with Menace that when it dies, everyone can discard their hand and draw 7. That's great for us. Even if we have good stuff in our hand, probably we've already cast it using affinity, we want to get a fresh 7. In addition, Ruin Grinder has Mountain Cycling for 2 generic mana. That means we can discard it from our hand by paying 2 generic to search our library for a mountain, reveal it, put it in our hand, and shuffle. Terrific. I am not running any typed duels in this deck because all of my lands that come in tapped, I think, are stronger than something that simply just taps for mana when it's untapped. But if you want to put more of a budget into this, you could absolutely put in Sacred Foundry, the Shock land, or what's the Surveil land? Elegant Parlor, the red-white Surveil land. Even if you want to run those tap duels, that would also be good. And you can mountain cycle for them because all it requires is that the card be a mountain card, not necessarily a basic mountain. The same is true for Angel of the Ruins because it has plane cycling for 2. You can do the same thing, just pay 2, discard it from your hand, find a planes, put it in your hand and shuffle. But what does the creature actually do? Well, it's a 5/7 artifact creature angel with flying for 5 and double white, and when it enters, we exile up to 2 target artifacts and or enchantments. So it's exile rather than destroy, it hits 2 things, and it disenchants. 2 things, that's great. And if we don't need it, we can just plane cycle it. Next, from the Doctor Who decks is Cybermen Squadron. 7 generic mana for an artifact creature Cyberman, it's a 5/5, and it says non-legendary artifact creatures you control have Myriad, which means, simply, if we have 3 opponents and we attack with the Cybermen, because it is a non-legendary artifact creature. If we attack opponent A with the Cybermen, when we attack with it, we will make a token copy of the Cybermen for opponent B that will be tapped and attacking them, and one for opponent C. We do it for every one of our opponents. We can choose, instead of attacking the opponent, to have it attack a planeswalker they control, and then at the end of combat, those tokens get exiled if they are still in play, if they haven't died. So this works for all of our non-legendary artifact creatures. Imagine doing this with Angel of the Ruins. The copies come in, and they double disenchant things with exile. Imagine doing it with Ruin Grinder. The Ruin Grinder's copies attack, maybe they get double blocked because of Menace and die, and that means they trigger, and every player can discard their hand and draw 7. Cybermen Squadron works so well for almost all of our cards, because some of them are legendary, of course, and we just get so much out of it. And if we have something like Liberator in play, we've just made a whole bunch of other artifacts, which means we can cast things at flash speed and take advantage of the fact that our affinity number has risen quite a bit. Maybe if we are attacking with, where's our Juggernaut? The Darksteel Juggernaut. We get 2 extra Juggernauts, all of which see each other, so the affinity number goes up by 2, so their power and toughness goes by 2. Seems really nice. That's our Cybermen Squadron. Next up is another Edge of Eternities commander card, Depth Shaker Titan. This is really cool. 5 and double red for an artifact creature robot that says when it enters, any number of target non-artifacts you control become 3/3 artifact creatures, sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. So if we had 2 treasures in play, we could turn them into 3/3 creatures this turn, as long as we're willing to sacrifice them at the end step. But how does that help us? Well, the Titan gives each artifact creature we control melee, trample, and haste. So our treasures are now hasty, which maybe they didn't need to be, but maybe they do. They have trample, 3/3 tramplers are good, but also they have melee, which means whenever a creature with melee attacks, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each opponent that we've attacked this combat. So let's say we have those 2 treasures. The Depth Shaker Titan comes in, it is an artifact creature, so it's going to get melee, trample, and haste as well. It animates our 2 treasures. We use the Titan to attack opponent A, one of our treasures to attack opponent B, and one of our treasures to attack opponent C. All of their melee abilities trigger, and they see that we have attacked 3 opponents this turn. So they all get +3/+3. So these are 6/6 trampling treasures, and the Depth Shaker Titan is an 8/8 trampling artifact creature. This will apply to all of our artifact creatures, not just itself and the non-creature artifacts that we animated. So this ability sticks around and helps everything. Very exciting. Next, another classic, it's Meteor Golem. 7 generic mana for an artifact creature golem. When it enters, destroy a non-land permanent opponent controls. This is great removal. It's just a 3/3 for 7 mana, but it is a contributor to affinity, and it takes advantage of affinity. We might be able to cast this for free, which is a free 3/3 that blows up a non-land permanent. Love Meteor Golem. Mirror Battlesphere, oh, so big. 7 generic mana for a 4/7 artifact creature Mirror Construct. When it enters, we make 4 1/1 artifact creatures called mirrors. And when it attacks, we can tap any number of mirror that we control, which of course we will have 4. If we do, the Battle Sphere gets a power bonus equal to the number of mirror we tapped, and it does that much damage to the player or planeswalker that it's attacking. So if we attack with this, we're going to tap all 4 mirror, probably, to make it into an 8/7 that does immediately 4 damage to the player or planeswalker that it's attacking. I also want to make mention, even if all we do with these 4 mirror is just tap them for the Battle Sphere, they are going to sit on the battlefield being 4 contributors to Affinity, because they are all artifacts, as is the Battle Sphere. So this is 7 mana to increase our Affinity number by 5 at the very least. Next, Braum, you did something so beautiful. This is Platinum Angel. 7 generic mana for a flying artifact creature angel that says you can't lose the game and your opponents can't win the game. A classic from the showdown at Pro Tour Honolulu. This is a 4/4 angel that keeps us alive. We can take an infinite amount of damage as long as it's not a mandatory loop and not lose the game because the Platinum Angel says we can't lose the game. Maybe our opponent is crazy and running Barren Glory and they get off their alternate victory condition. They still can't win the game, not while the Platinum Angel is out. This buys us time at the very least, but we might be able to do some great things with this because it's a 4/4 flyer. And, best of all, it reduces the costs of all of our spells while Sami is in play because it is an artifact. Next, really fun, the 3-fold Thunderhulk. 7 generic mana for an artifact creature gnome. It's a gnome. It comes in with 3+1/+1 counters on it because it's a 0/0, and whenever it attacks and when it enters, you make a number of 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature tokens equal to its power. So it'll come in with 3 counters on it, and when it does, it'll make 3 1/1 gnomes. Then we can pay 2 and sacrifice another artifact to put a counter on it. Let's say we did that. Maybe we sacrifice one of the gnomes, so now it's a 4/4. We attack with it, and it makes 4 gnomes because its power has become 4. So we're back up to the 3 gnomes we had, and we have an additional 3. If we put counters on it in other ways, like say Steel Overseer, we're going to get that same thing. And every time it enters and attacks, of course, beyond it just itself, we're making artifact tokens. So we're making our affinity that much higher. Next is a beloved friend. It's Bosch Iron Golem. 8 generic mana for a legendary artifact creature golem. Bosch is a 6/7 trample that has the ability for us to pay 3 and a red, which again, it's an activated ability, so it's not reduced by affinity. And we sacrifice an artifact, and Bosch will deal damage equal to the sacrificed artifact's mana value to any target. We can blow up our opponent's scariest creatures, we can go directly to the face, we can kill planeswalkers, whatever we want to do with Bosch. And it's not based, like Fling, on the creature's power. It's based on the artifact's mana value. So there are lots of different tokens we're going to be able to sacrifice if we want to. That doesn't do too much because most tokens are going to be mana value 0. But we have plenty of big creatures that we can definitely sacrifice once they've outlived their usefulness. Maybe the Meteor Golem blows something up, then we can use Bosch to do 7 damage to something because that's its mana value. Bosch is a great sack outlet for this reason. Finally, we have Darksteel Colossus. 11 generic mana, but it's only $4.50 because they printed it in Foundations. It is an artifact creature golem with trample and indestructible, and if it would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, we reveal it and shuffle it into our library instead. Which means if we sacrifice it with Bosch, we're going to do 11 damage to any target, and the Darksteel Colossus doesn't stay in our graveyard, it gets shuffled into our library. Love this big boy, which we may be getting for free. You never know. There's a lot of artifacts in this deck. So that covers our friends. These are our artifact creatures. Let's talk a little bit about the tokens that we can make, many of which are creatures, some of which are not though. So the Clown Car, of course, half of our 6-sided dice, on average, are going to make us Clown Robot artifact creature tokens. Diamond Pickaxe. This is another one of our 1 mana artifacts. It costs a single red for an artifact equipment that equips for 2 and has indestructible. You can't break this thing. And it says, equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has whenever this creature attacks, make a treasure. So this is making treasure tokens for us. I'm going to talk about both of these things first of all. So the Pickaxe has a whenever this creature attacks trigger. There are equipment that you could put on, let's say, Sami, that trigger on combat damage, making treasures, rather than on attack. In a way, that might be better, because Sami has double strike, so when Sami attacks and hits twice, Sami will do damage both times, and it'll trigger both times. That other artifact, equipment you might be using, like a Beamtown Beatstick, for example. I chose the pickaxe because it's an attack trigger rather than a damage trigger, and that seems counterintuitive, but hear me out. Sami is our commander, so Sami's combat damage is commander damage. Sami has double strike, so Sami is threatening. Sami being +1/+1 is a 5/5 double strike. That's very scary. So Sami is likely to be blocked if possible. So Sami won't be doing damage to an opponent, so we won't get our treasure token. But we at least get a treasure token if we attack. And this is true of our other creatures as well, which don't have double strike, so the attack is more certain than the damage. That's my thinking, at least. Of course, build your deck however you want. The other thing I want to talk about is how treasures work. Treasures tap and sacrifice to add a mana of any color. I won't go into the exact details of how casting spells works, but think of it this way. Let's say you have a spell like Diamond Pickaxe that you want to cast. Or let's have a better example, in fact. Let's say our example is Collector's Vault. Collector's Vault costs 2 generic mana. Let's say we have Sami in play and a treasure. We can say, I want to cast Collector's Vault using the treasure, both for affinity and for its mana. The way that works is we are proposing the casting of the spell, and we have to figure out how much it's going to cost us. We know that its mana cost is 2 generic mana. That will be reduced by affinity. Affinity is going to reduce it by 1 because we have a treasure in play, and that's an artifact. We can then say, all right, now we have determined the total cost of the spell. I'd like to pay for it with mana abilities. Tokens have the mana ability, tap and sacrifice it to add 1 mana of any color. When we do that, the token leaves the battlefield, but the cost is already locked in. We don't have to worry about having sacrificed the token to make mana for it, and then affinity saying, oh, we don't have enough artifacts in play, the cost that we have to pay is going to go back up. That's not how it works. We get it locked in if we sacrifice the token as a mana effect as part of casting the spell. It does not work that way if we were to, say, sacrifice the treasure first and then propose casting Collector's Vault. We have to do it as part of casting the spell and paying for it. I know that seems complicated, but the easiest way to just think about it is it works the way you want. Your treasures will count for affinity and then can be sacrificed for mana to further pay for the spell as long as you do it as part of casting the spell. Don't worry about it. So that's why Diamond Pickaxe, so good. Helps us in multiple different ways. And I think that the attack trigger is probably better. And of course, making treasures counts for affinity, and we can use it for mana as well. So let's actually talk about Collector's Vault. Collector's Vault is 2 generic mana for an artifact, so it adds to our affinity. We can pay 2 and tap it to draw a card and then discard a card and make a treasure. Seems pretty good. It's not actually card advantage because we draw a card and then discard one, but it does give us some selection, and sometimes that's worth it. Plus, making the treasure means, if you think of it this way, maybe we have the Collector's Vault in play. We pay 2 generic mana, tap it, draw the card, discard the card, make the treasure. That treasure, because of affinity, can now pay for 2 mana in the casting cost of an artifact. So we've sort of gotten our money back, if you want to think of it like that. Just little tricks. Next up, we have Junk Jet. This is from the Fallout decks, and it's really fun. For 1 and a red, we get an artifact equipment that equips for just 1, and it says when it enters, we make a junk token. What is a junk token? Junk is a token artifact. It is an artifact, so it counts just like Junk Jet does toward affinity, and it says tap and sacrifice this artifact to exile the top card of your library. We can play that card this turn. We can only do this as a sorcery, though. So the Junk Jet comes with a free extra artifact. We're paying 2 mana for the Junk Jet, and we're getting 2 artifacts out of it. So we're sort of getting our money back again. We don't have to use that junk token right away. We can hang on to it and maybe get a little bit of impulse draw. We also have, for the Junk Jet, to pay 3 and sacrifice an artifact, we can double the equipped creature's power until end of turn. We have a double striking commander, so putting Junk Jet on Sami means we can pay 3 generic mana, sack an artifact, and Sami is an 8/4. We can do it again because it's not limited to anything beyond our ability to pay this 3 over and over and sack artifacts. Maybe Sami becomes a 16/4 with double strike. That's a one-hit kill if they're not blocked. It's just nice that the Junk Jet comes with the junk that we can sacrifice, but we don't have to. We've got lots of other artifacts to sacrifice in this deck, some of which like to be sacrificed, which we'll see more of soon. We've seen our Securitron Squadron. This is an artifact creature, but it makes token copies of itself with Squad. Next up is Weapons Manufacturing. Very cool card. 2 mana, 1 and a red, for an enchantment that says whenever a non-token artifact we control enters, make a colorless artifact token called Munitions. When this token leaves the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to any target. Munitions, as you can see, do not have the ability to sacrifice themselves. We have to sacrifice them some other way. It's one of the reasons that our deck has so many sack outlets in it in the first place, much like Junk Jet. Pay 3, sack an artifact to double the creature's power, but if that artifact was a munitions token, that munitions token then leaves the battlefield and it'll do 2 damage to any target. So that's a free shock right there. More importantly, for our deck, Weapons Manufacturing means whenever we cast whenever we have a non-token artifact creature, whenever we have a non-token artifact enter, we get contribution to our affinity. We might end up with so many munitions in play, and they're just doing nothing for us except discounting all our spells when Sami's in play. That's absolutely worth 2 red mana. Great card. Next we have White Sun's Twilight. This is one of our Wraths, and it's excellent in this deck. For X and double white, we have a sorcery that says you gain X life, and then create X 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature tokens with Toxic 1, and this token can't block. If X is 5 or more, destroy all other creatures. So we've got 3 things going on here. We're gaining life, which is kind of incidental to us. We're making a bunch of 1/1 unblocking creature tokens that are artifacts, so they are helping out our affinity. They do have Toxic 1, which is a little bit more poison for us. And in addition, if we make 5 or more of those little guys and gain 5 or more life, we're blowing up the rest of the board, which does get rid of Sami, unfortunately. But we end up with so many little tokens, especially because this is an X spell. So the cost we're paying is reduced by our affinity. If our affinity is 5, let's say, we can pay double white, make X5, and we get all of these effects. And we get 5 little Phyrexian Mights, which don't reduce anything, because if Sami was in play, Sami's dead now. But if we have the mana to recast Sami, Sami sees these Mights in play as soon as they're in play, and now we have a further 5 reduction, or 5 mana reduction, thanks to the affinity from these artifacts. It's also not super far-fetched to say that X might be 10, 15, even 20. If that's the case, we've just wiped the board, put 20 1/1s with Toxic 1 into play. Unless there's another board wipe that follows it up, on our next turn, we're probably going to kill one of our opponents. Maybe more than one, depending on how many we put out and how much they can do to protect themselves. We swing in with 15 1/1s, they might block 5 of them, let's say. And if they do, they'll still take 10 and Toxic 1 from each of those, which is 10 poison, and they just lose. Yeah, White Sun's Twilight is great. Plus, I should re-mention, gain a bunch of life. That might help us. Next we have Anam Pakal, Thousandth Moon. This is from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. It's 1, a red, and a white for a 1/2 legendary human soldier. Not an artifact, but a friend. Just not tagged as one. Whenever you attack with 1 or more non-gnome creatures, it says, put a 1/1 counter on Anam Pakal, then create X 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature tokens that are tapped and attacking, where X is the number of 1/1 counters on Anam Pakal. It's not Anam Pakal's power, it's the number of counters on them. So this is a way for us to make a lot more artifact creature tokens, because all we have to do is attack. If the attack is only with gnomes, it doesn't trigger. But as long as at least one of our creatures attacking is not a gnome, this triggers. Anim Pakal gets the counter, even if Anim Pakal themselves is not attacking. And then we make a bunch of tapped and attacking 1/1s that are artifact creatures. Maybe our opponent blocks them all and we didn't get much out of it, other than the counter, which we'll add to the next time we do this. Eventually, we're going to end up with a few of these little gnomes floating around, helping us out with our affinity. Anim Pakal doesn't produce as many artifact tokens as some of our other cards, but it is an excellent card for combat, and it's a low mana value compared to some of our cards. We've seen Brea's Apprentice. Brea's Apprentice makes a Thopter token. We have not seen Digside Engineer. For 2 and a white, we get a Dwarf Artificer, that is a 3/3, that says whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may pay 2 generic mana. This is not part of the casting cost, it's not an additional cost, it's not reduced by affinity. And if we pay that, we make a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with the ability that it gets +1/+1 for each artifact we control. Generally, people call these Karnstructs, after Karn the Silver Golem. These things are amazing. They just become huge in our deck. If our affinity is 10, these are 10/10 creatures. They don't have any other abilities besides being 10/10s. But we get one every time we cast an artifact spell and pay 2 extra to this triggered ability. And they are artifacts too, so they're adding to our affinity. It may be that we can cast 3, 4, 5 artifact spells in a row for free and just pay the 2 every time and get Karnstructs each time we do it. Very powerful. We have Monologue Tax in this deck. It's also from Commander 21, but it's from the Silver Quill deck, I believe. Monologue Tax is 2 and a white for an enchantment that says whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, make a treasure. So every time in Commander, players tend to cast more than one spell on their turns. When they do, we're going to get a treasure, which again gives us mana, but also gives us affinity. Very nice. Professional Facebreaker is next. For 2 and a red, we have a human warrior creature with menace that says, it's a 2/3, I'm sorry. It says whenever one or more creatures we control deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. So this is a combat damage effect as opposed to the attack trigger that we saw on the Diamond Pickaxe, which means that this happens when it's one or more creatures, but it also happens each time they deal combat damage to a player, and it doesn't say to any number of players. So that means that if we were to attack 2 different players and they both deal combat damage, then we'll get 2 treasures. If Sami attacks and isn't blocked, that's dealing combat damage twice, so we'll also get 2 treasures. So if, for example, Sami attacks opponent A, we have 2 other creatures that are attacking opponents B and C respectively. If none of them are blocked and they all deal damage, we're going to make 4 treasures. Once for Sami's first strike damage, and then once for each of their separate regular damages. Anyway, Professional Facebreaker, a great way to make repeated treasures, and has the ability, if we sacrifice a treasure, we can Impulse Draw, exile the top card of our library, and this turn we can play that card. Play, not cast, which means if we haven't made our land drop and we exile a land, we can make that as our land drop. Next up, we have Skyclave Relic. This is one of our mana rocks, and it's so good. It costs 3 generic mana, but it has Kicker for 3, which is an additional cost. So if we kick it, both of the total cost of 6 will be reduced by affinity. So it might be free. This is a Manalith. It's a 3 mana rock that taps to add a mana of any color. It happens to be indestructible, and when it enters, if it was kicked, we make 2 copies of it that are tokens and are tapped. So that means for 6 mana, we get 3 artifacts in play, which of course adds to our affinity, and one of them can tap for mana right away. The other 2, the tokens, are tapped, but they'll be able to tap for mana on the next turn. Skyclave Relic is great for this deck. I know I keep saying that, and it sounds like I'm bragging on my choices for what I put in the deck. I don't mean it that way. I'm just excited about this deck. I think Sami is really cool. So we've seen the Stridehanger Automaton and how every time we make artifact tokens, which is this entire section, we get an extra token in the form of a 1/1 Thopter. We've seen Thrawn Spider. It makes a Power Stone when it comes in. We have not seen Thousand Moons Smithy. So this is 2 and double white for a legendary artifact. It is an artifact. When it enters, we make a white gnome soldier artifact creature token, good grief, with this token's power and toughness are each equal to the number of artifacts and or creatures you control, so it's better than a construct, because it doesn't just count our affinity number, it counts all of our creatures as well. If we have artifact creatures, which we have many of, it doesn't double count them, it just counts as one. And then at the beginning of our first main phase, we may tap 5 untapped artifacts and or creatures that we control. We have a lot of utility creatures that we don't want to attack with, so we could tap them for this, plus we've got lots of artifacts. In any case, if we do that, I should also mention this is an artifact, so we can tap the smithy if we want to. If we do that, we transform it, which means we flip it over. If it was tapped, it will remain tapped. We're not exiling it and returning it to the battlefield transformed. Anyway, when it transforms, it is now a legendary artifact land, which means it's a land, but it still adds to our affinity because it's an artifact. It taps for white, and whenever we cast an artifact or creature spell using this white mana, we make one of these gnome artifact creature tokens, which again, those add to affinity, and they're huge. They're bigger than constructs. So it is to our advantage if we can, at the beginning of our first main phase, if we can tap 5 artifacts or creatures other than Thousand Moon Smithy, that's great, because it flips immediately into a mana source, which we're gonna have a use for, and we can make another gnome soldier. That's a super construct. Plus, it continues to add to our affinity, because it's an artifact on both sides. Next up is Mishra's Self-Replicator. We've seen this, and how when we cast Historic spells, we can pay 1, it'll make a copy of itself, and the copies do the same. Next is Transmutation Font, great for this section. 5 generic mana, so maybe free for us. We can tap it to make a blood token, a clue token, or a food token. Very briefly, a food token is an artifact token that if you pay 2, tap and sack it, you gain 3 life. A clue token is an artifact token that if you pay 2, you don't have to tap it, but you sack it and you draw a card. A blood token is an artifact token. If you pay 1, tap it, sacrifice it, and discard a card, you can draw a card. So you can make one of any of those. All of them are good. And for 3 and tap, and sacrifice 3 artifact tokens with different names. They might be a blood, a clue, and a food if you've made those, but they might be, a blood and a clue and a copy of Skyclave Relic, or one of those munitions tokens that weapons manufacturing makes. As long as they are 3 artifact tokens with different names, you then get to search your library for an artifact card, put it on the battlefield, and shuffle. Go find your biggest, scariest artifact. You can only do this as a sorcery, and of course, since it taps only once per turn, but Transmutation Font does work in this deck. Very good. We've seen the Battle Sphere, how it comes in and makes mirror tokens, so 7 mana to make 5 artifacts into the battlefield. Threefold Thunderhulk, similarly, 7 mana, and we get a total of 4 artifacts onto the battlefield. They both do good things. And that is our token section. Before we move on to our support, we do want to look at the teamwork section. These are cards that help out our team because robot friends are friends. They want to be friends with each other. We've seen Steel Overseer and how this can put counters on all of our artifact creatures. Liberator can give us flash for all of our colorless spells and artifact spells. Alabu gives our artifact creatures haste and cares about when we attack with them and when we have them tapped. Bronze Guardian, of course, gives all of our artifacts Ward 2, and its power is based on our affinity number. Artificer's Dragon has this incredible group fire-breathing ability. Cyberman Squadron gives all of our artifact creatures that aren't legends Myriad. And of course, Depth Shaker Titan makes all our artifact creatures have trample, haste, and melee. So we have seen, generally, our game plan. Let's talk now about our support section, starting with card advantage. So I use the word draw here as my tag, just as a shorthand for card advantage. It doesn't mean that everything in this section is actual draw. So Market Backwalker, when it dies, we draw a card for every counter on it. We've seen that. Slag Drill Scrapper, it's a sack outlet. We can sack artifacts and lands to draw cards. Collector's Vault isn't actually card advantage, but we are getting some selection, so maybe kind of close. Demand Answers, for 1 and a red, is an instant that says as an additional cost, sack an artifact or discard a card. So it's a sack outlet, or maybe we discard something. And then we draw 2 cards. This is just an upgraded version of Thrill of Possibility, which is itself an upgraded version of Tormenting Voice. So I love Demand Answers. Sad to see a Throne of Eldraine card get power crept in Thrill of Possibility, but ultimately very good for our deck and gives us a way to sacrifice our artifacts. Junk Jet, of course, the junk token is a way for us to get some Impulse Draw. Next we have Oswald Fiddlebender, very cool card. 1 and a white for a 2/2 legendary gnome artificer. It's another artificer. It has the ability Magical Tinkering. It lets us Birthing Pod our artifacts. A white and tap and sack an artifact. We can go through our library and find an artifact that has mana value 1 higher than the sacrificed artifact's mana value, and it goes directly onto the battlefield, only as a sorcery. So we have... This is what our mana curve looks like. Don't worry about how crazy it is, because so much of this gets discounted by affinity. Think about this. From 0 all the way to 8, we have artifacts available to us. Artifacts or artifact creatures, which means any one of these numbers that we have as our mana value on an artifact, we can sacrifice it to Oswald and get something from the next category up. Even if we have one of these 7 drops, like the Meteor Golem, we could sacrifice it and get up to Bosch. The only thing we can't get with Oswald is the Darksteel Colossus. We don't have any 9 or 10 drops. But there are some in the considering section if you'd like to think about those and including them yourself. So Oswald Fiddlebender, lots of fun. We've seen Rhea's Apprentice and how we can sack artifacts by tapping it in order to get some Impulse Draw. Next we have Lochiel, Clockwork Scholar. Very cool card. I wanted to put this in the Friends section, but it's not an artifact creature. It is, however, a 2/4 legendary elephant artificer for 2 and a white that says prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to attacking artifact creatures you control. So if we attack with a bunch of artifact creatures, they can sure take non-combat damage, they can still be lightning bolted, but any blockers, they're not going to take any damage from. They have to be attacking for this to be the case, so it's not like we can block with them and have that damage prevented, but as long as we're attacking, which we're going to, we're a Boros deck, we don't take any damage. They don't take any damage when they attack, from at least from combat damage. Also, whenever one or more artifact creatures we control enter, we draw a card. Only once per turn, but we're going to have artifact creatures entering every turn. So we're going to be replacing our artifact creatures in our hand every turn with Lochiel. This is an amazing amount of value for just 3 mana. We've seen the Professional Facebreaker and how they can turn our treasures into Impulse Draw. Now, this is one of my favorite cards in the deck. Saheeli's Directive is so cool. A sorcery for X and triple red that says, ignore this for a moment, reveal the top X cards of your library. You may put any number of artifact cards with mana value X or less from among them onto the battlefield. Then put all cards revealed this way that weren't put on your battlefield into your graveyard. So imagine we have 11 artifacts in play. We play 3 red, we say X is 11, we pay nothing more than the 3 red because affinity reduces this by 11, and then we look at the top 11 and any artifacts we find go into the battlefield because our most expensive artifact is the 11 drop Darksteel Colossus. We just put everything that we find that's an artifact. And again, 53 cards in our deck are artifacts. That's just how this works with affinity. But Saheeli's Directive also has Improvise, which means after we activate other mana abilities, we can tap our artifacts, any of our artifacts, and each of them will pay for 1 of the X. So it may be the case that it's worth it to us, since we have so many artifact creatures in our deck, to say, oh, what's our affinity? It's like 10, let's say. We'll pay the 3 red, and then we'll know that affinity will reduce this X by 10, so we'll say X is at least 10, and then we just use Improvise to tap every single other artifact we have and every land we have. At that point, if our affinity was 10, we're tapping 10 artifacts. So maybe we don't have any other mana to throw onto that from our lands, and so X becomes 20. We look at the top 20 cards of our library and get every single artifact from them onto the battlefield. Unbelievable. What a cool card. Anyway, we've seen the Thran Spider and how it can For 7 generic, look at the top 4, get an artifact from them, put it in our hand. And the Sad Robot, of course, when it dies, it draws us a card. Next, we have the Might Stone and Weak Stone from the Brothers' War. 5 generic mana. For a legendary artifact, it's a Power Stone. When it enters, we get to choose to either draw 2 cards, or give target creature -5/-5 until end of turn. So this is either removal or card advantage. And it taps for 2 colorless mana, which is Power Stone mana. Can't be used to cast non-artifact spells. So again, we can use this for activating abilities, we can use this to cast any of our many artifacts, we just can't cast any other kinds of spells with it that aren't artifacts. But yeah, 5 mana for a good little bit of ramp and some great enters effects. We've seen the transmutation font and how with paying 3, tapping, and sacrificing 3 artifact tokens with different names, we can tutor an artifact to our battlefield. Combustible Gear Hulk might come in and let us Ancestral Recall. Ruin Grinder can Mountain Cycle, which puts a card in our hand, and so does Angel of the Ruins, it plane cycles. That is our card advantage. Let's talk about our acceleration. So Everflowing Chalice is kind of an X spell, or maybe it's an XX spell, 2X. It costs 0 mana, but it has multi-kicker 2, so we can pay 2 generic as many times as we want. And then it will enter with a number of charge counters for each time we kicked it, and it taps for colorless mana for each charge counter on it. So essentially, they could have, I guess, templated this as an XX spell, and it enters with X charge counters, but that's how we want to look at it. It's a double X, and we can pay as much as we want into it, as long as it's in multiples of 2. But we decide what that number is, then reduce that total amount by our affinity amount, our affinity value, and then just pay the difference in mana. And we get our Everflowing Chalice with all the charge counters on it that it would have. And we get to tap it for quite a lot. And remember, it's also an artifact, so it's adding to our affinity. Diamond Pickaxe, of course, adds to our affinity and can make us treasures, which is ramp. Everyone knows Soul Ring, but let's take a look at it. Ooh, so pretty. Costs 1, taps for 2, you want it in your deck. Wayfarer's Bauble is very nice. 1 generic mana for an artifact that if we pay 2, tap and sack it, we can Rampant Growth. That's just the thing we want to do if we need colored mana, but if we don't, we can hang on to it and it's just adding to our affinity total. So it works for us either way. For just 1 generic and it comes in and reduces all our spells by 1 if Sami's in play, so it's like it's free. Pretty good. Arcane Signet, again, something you definitely want in your deck. Costs 2, taps to make either red or white in this deck. 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. Our commander is more than 1 color, so we're going to run our Arcane Signet in it. And remember, in this deck, if Sami's out, it adds to our affinity. We've seen Collector's Vault, it makes treasures. We've seen Zookeeper Mechan, it taps for red. We haven't seen Cloud Key. Costs 3, and as it enters, we choose Artifact, Creature, Enchantment, Instant, or Sorcery. In this deck, we will choose Artifact. And it says, spells we cast of the chosen type cost 1 less to cast. This is like saying Cloud Key gives all of our artifacts. I mean, it is. It just reduces the cost of it. But that's sort of like when we're casting artifacts, we have a bonus affinity. But not just 1, Cloud Key itself is an artifact. So Cloud Key, while Sami is out, is reducing all of our artifacts by 2. 1 because of its affinity, and 1 because of its ability. You can calculate that however you want to. I think probably easiest to have like a 20-sided die that keeps track of how many artifacts you have, and then just remember that you also have the Cloud Key effect on it. Because Sami will reduce the cost of your non-artifact spells as well by affinity. Cloud Key will only reduce your artifacts. So, we've seen Monologue Tax. It makes treasures. Professional Faker's Breaker does too. Skyclave Relic is a Manolith and makes copies of itself, probably. Thran Spider gives us a Power Stone. And the Sad Robot can Rampant Growth us when it enters the battlefield. So that is our acceleration. It's time for interaction. We're going to start with Dispatch. Dispatch is 1 white mana for an instant that taps a creature. That's pretty good. but it also has Metalcraft. So if we have 3 or more artifacts, we also exile that creature. So in our deck, most of the time, Dispatch is 1 white, exile that creature, they get no kickback. It's conditional, but it's better than Swords to Plowshares in that case. Luckily, we also have Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile. Both of these, I like to say, are the same card in that they cost 1 white, they are an instant that exiles a target creature, and they give the creature's controller a kickback. It's just a different kickback. Swords to Plowshares lets that controller gain life equal to the power of the exiled creature. Path to Exile lets that controller Rampant Growth. Both are great removal spells, especially alongside Dispatch. This is a good suite of white removal. We also have Emergency Eject. I prefer this to Stroke of Midnight from Wilds of Eldraine, which I prefer to Generous Gift. I know Generous Gift can hit lands as well. I'm not looking to remove lands with this if I can help it. I just want to be able to have something that gets rid of a non-land permanent. So, for 2 and a white, Emergency Eject does exactly that. Destroy target non-land permanent. Its controller creates a Lander token. Lander tokens are token versions of a Wayfarer's Bauble. It's an artifact token. If you pay 2, tap and sack it, you can Rampant Growth. I think that that's better than the Stroke of Midnight because it gives them a 1/1 blocker with that. This way, they have to actually pay to get their Rampant Growth. So, Path to Exile Rampant Growths on their own by exiling a creature. This can destroy any non-land permanent, but it costs us 2 more. So, pretty, I wouldn't say comparable. Path to Exile is definitely better, but Emergency Eject is very nice as a universal removal spell, universal other than land. Of course, Alibu, when we attack with at least 1 artifact creature, we look at the number of tapped artifacts we have, and we can do that much damage to any target. Pretty good removal. Mightstone of Weakstone, of course, can give something -5/-5 when it enters. Angel of the Ruins, when it enters, can exile 2 artifacts and or enchantments. Meteor Golem, when it enters, blows up a non-land permanent. Bosch, of course, we can pay 3 in a red to sack an artifact and do damage equal to the artifact's mana value to any target. And we also have Spine of Ishsaw. For 7 generic mana, this is an artifact that says when it enters, destroy target permanent. So we can blow up lands with this. Are we going to? It depends on how much of a jerk we are. Typically, I have found lands are not going to be the problem. We want to blow up our opponent's commander or their scariest artifact or enchantment or creature, whatever it may be. But we're going to blow something up, and we might be doing it for free since this is just 7 generic mana. And when this artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, we bounce it back to our hand. Or I guess it's not bouncing because it's not from the battlefield, but yeah, it's going to come back to our hand. So this is the best example of an artifact that we want to sacrifice in the deck. Just imagine if you cast this while you have Bosch out. This comes in, blows something up, we sack it to Bosch, do 7 damage to something, it comes back to our hand, and if we cast it for less than 7, we could probably do it again right away and just keep blowing things up. If we have a cheap way, like a 1 generic mana way to sacrifice things, maybe Spine of Ishsaw becomes a sweet loop that until we run out of mana, we're blowing up all the scariest things on the board. That is our interaction suite. We're going to go now to the spells that are supplementing our game plan, the ones that are helping out without feeling like the core of it. We're going to start with our synergy cards. These are cards that care about how many artifacts we have in play and that sort of thing. Clown Car, of course, is an X spell, and all of our spells that are essentially X spells, I know Overflowing Chalice and Marketback Walker are essentially double X spells, but same principle. These all get reduced by our affinity number, just like everything else, but because that's all we have to put into them, that might be enough. So that's very good. Securitron Squadron works similarly because of Squad as a sort of multi-kicker. Saheeli's Directive, similarly, again, because it's an X spell. Bronze Guardian has synergy because it has its power based on our affinity number, and Darksteel Juggernaut is the same because its power and toughness are based on the affinity number. We have several sack outlets in this deck, 8 of them in fact, and here they are. We have seen all of these, of course. Slide Girl Scrapper, we can pay 2 tap and sack it sack an artifact or land to draw a card. Demand Answers, we can sacrifice an artifact as the additional cost. Junk Jet, we can sacrifice artifacts to double the equipped creature's power. Oswald Fiddlebitter sacrifices artifacts to birthing pod them. Brea's Apprentice sacrifices artifacts to either give us Impulse Draw or a power boost to a creature. Deep Shaker Titan does not sacrifice artifacts that same way. It's not as part of a cost. Instead, non-creature artifacts can become creatures, and then at the end of turn, we sacrifice them. So maybe we have the Spine of Ishza out, make it into a 3/3, attack with it. If they block it, it goes back to our hand and we can recast it. If they don't block it, at the end of turn, we'll sacrifice it. So this is a little bit of a roundabout way for us to sacrifice things, but it does work. Of course, Threefold Thunderhulk, we pay 2 and sack an artifact to put a counter on it, and Bosch, like we've said, pay 3 and a red to sacrifice it to do damage to a target. Next, let's look, since we mentioned it earlier, let's talk a little bit more about option B, our plan B. It's our double striking commander and playing a little bit of the Voltron game. Diamond Pickaxe, of course. Well, since I'm assuming all of these are going to go on Sami, they don't have to, but I'll do it for the sake of talking about it now. Diamond Pickaxe makes Sami into a 5/5 that, when it attacks, makes a treasure. Junk Jet makes Sami into exactly what it already is, or what they already are, rather, except that we can pay 3 and sack an artifact to double Sami's power. Very nice. Silver Shroud costume is something we haven't seen yet. Really cool. Silver Shroud costume is 2 generic mana, so maybe free, for an artifact equipment that has flash and equips for 3, except that when it enters, we just attach it to a creature we control. That means it snaps on, it auto-equips. That creature will gain Shroud until end of turn, which means it can't be the target of spells or abilities, period. That means ours as well. So we can't put other equipment on it, for example, or target it with abilities that have a source, or targeted from abilities from sources of our own. Shroud is like worse hexproof. It affects us too, but it definitely protects Sami if we put this on Sami and, Sami's already being targeted. And it makes Sami unblockable. That's why it's in here. Flash it in before blockers, Sami can't be blocked, gets in, does a minimum of 8 damage, more if they're pumped up somehow, which maybe they will be by Celestial Armor. 2 and a white for another equipment with flash, and when it enters, attach it to a creature we control. That creature gains hexproof and indestructible. So hexproof, better than Shroud for us. Indestructible protects Sami even more, and gives this creature +2/+0 and flying. Flying is not as good as unblockable, but it's still pretty good. And the +2/+0 makes Sami into a 6/4, which is to say, unblocked, Sami's going to do 12 commander damage to someone. That's pretty great. And if we have to, we can always equip this for 3 and a white as well. Finally, we have Grafted Exoskeleton, the last of our poison cards in this deck. There's only just the 3. For 4 generic mana, this is an equipment that equips for 2. It does not snap on, but it only equips for 2. That's all it costs. So if we've been able to cast it for free, we just pay 2, and Sami is now suddenly getting +2/+2 and Infect. Infect gets a bad rap in Commander, and it kind of deserves it, but it's not unfun. It just shows here's where you should be directing your removal. You put removal in your deck, right? So Infect means the creature that has it, Sami in this case, deals damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters, and to players in the form of poison counters. So let's say Sami has the Grafted Exoskeleton on them, and they are now a 6/6 with Infect. We attack, and our opponent blocks with an 8/8. Sami will do first strike damage, which will be 6 Infect damage, which means it puts 6 -1/-1 counters on that creature. The creature is now a 2/2, and we go to regular damage. It'll do 2 damage to Sami, and Sami will do another 6 -1/-1 counters to it, killing it. So Sami has protected themselves and has gotten rid of a creature, which is exactly what we want Double Strike to do, but sometimes the first strike damage doesn't save them. With Infect, it definitely will. And more importantly, if Sami's unblocked, well, Sami has Infect and +2/+2, that's 12 poison damage. So that's an immediate, that player loses the game. We also have one more ability. Whenever Grafted Exoskeleton becomes unattached from a permanent, sacrifice that permanent. Yeah, we're not going to move Grafted Exoskeleton off of Sami. However, we might move it off of another artifact creature, in case we need to find a way to sacrifice those things. I don't think this is likely to happen, but go with me for a moment. Maybe we use our giant red card to make one of our artifact tokens, like a munitions token, into a 3/3 until end of turn. Then we equip Grafted Exoskeleton to that 3/3, making it a 5/5 infect. We attack with it, and at end of turn, it sacrifices itself, and we just do the 2 damage from it being a munition. But we could also, at the end of turn, or after combat rather, use the equip ability to move this to Sami. It will cause us to sacrifice that permanent, which is a munition, and it will do 2 damage to something. I'm just sort of blue skying here. This seems like fun. If it actually happens in a game, if you can make this work, let me know in the comments. I will give you internet points. So that is our equipment section. Let's move on to our protection. Protection is pretty similar. We have a few things. Silver Shroud costume can give Sami, presumably Sami, really the equipped creature, Shroud until end of turn. Celestial Armor can give an equipped creature hexproof and indestructible until end of turn when it comes in. Low Shield protects all of our attacking artifact creatures from combat damage. Bronze Guardian gives all of our artifacts, not just creatures, Ward 2. And Platinum Angel protects us because it means we can't lose the game as long as it's in play. We have an evasion section, which we've already seen everything of. Deep Shaker Titan, that was the one I was thinking of when I was talking about turning a munition into a 3/3 and putting Grafted Exoskeleton on it. In any case, Silver Shroud costume makes Sami or whatever it's equipped to unblockable. Celestial Armor makes whatever it's equipped to a flyer. And Deep Shaker Titan gives all of our artifact creatures trample. And melee, which adds to the trample because it's adding more damage. So trample lets us get a little damage in over, even if we're blocking. We've seen our evasion now. Let's take a look at what I'm calling Wincons. This is just my section to talk about our 3 poison damage cards. We've seen the Grafted Exoskeleton. It gives probably Sami, but maybe someone else, Infect. Virulent Silencer means when we do combat damage with non-token artifact creatures we control, the defending player is going to get 2 poison counters per creature. And of course, White Sun's Twilight gives us Might tokens, which have Toxic 1. This is, again, Plan C. We don't want this to be our big part of our deck, and we definitely have more cards in the deck to support the idea of a Voltron win, with Sami winning with commander damage. Then we do these 3, but if any of these 3 come out, they're probably going to do quite well for us. It's a very solid Plan C. Last of all, we have our Wraths section. White Sun's Twilight, of course, is a good Wrath. It can wipe the board, but we also have Organic Extinction. For 8 and double white, so a total of 10, but remember, that gets reduced by our affinity. We might just play double white for this. It says destroy all non-artifact creatures. So that does kill Sami, unfortunately. But most of our opponents' creatures are not going to be artifact creatures, as opposed to ours, which almost all of them are. So this is going to be a mostly one-sided board wipe, and in addition, if we really want to, we can improvise it too. We can tap our artifacts after we activate other mana abilities to pay for 1 each of this 8. If we don't have Sami out, that might be worth it, to just clear the board a little bit so our artifact creatures are ready to swing in, and then on our next turn, perhaps, we cast Sami and get them back out. That covers our spells. It's time to go in to our lands section, and I will go through this as quick as I can. Because our color balance is pretty pretty balanced, I should say. We have an equal number of basic mountains and plains. We're running 20 total basics. Works for our deck. I love the bounce lands, so I'm running the Boros Garrison. Bounce lands are named such because they come in tapped, and when they do, we have to bounce a land we control back to our hand. But Boros Garrison, as you can see, taps for red and white. That is to say, it taps for two mana. So if we were to play a basic, let's say, and then our next turn we tap the basic for mana, maybe use it, maybe play a Soul Ring, we play the Boros Garrison, it will come in tapped and bounce the basic, and then we play the basic again on our third turn. That means we've got 2 lands in play, but they're making 3 mana, and we hit our land drop, and we aren't behind on mana. The bounce lands are great. We just want to remember not to do that on our first couple of turns of the game without casting any spells, because if we do, let's say turn 1 we draw a card because it's commander, we're at 8 cards. We play a basic plains, we're down to 7, we pass the turn. Next turn we draw a card, we're at 8, We play a bounce land, the Boros Garrison. We go down to 7, it bounces the plains, we're back up at 8, we go to our end step, and we have to discard. We don't want to do that, so don't make that mistake. Next, we have 6 fixing lands. We have a couple of different ways we're doing this. It's a more than one color deck, so of course we're running Command Tower. It taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, so white or red. It's just like an Arcane Signet. Path of Ancestry is sort of like a tapped Command Tower. Comes in tapped, but it taps for, white or red, which is to say it's a tapped dual in that way, or a tapped dual land, just not a typed one. However, it says when we spend its mana to cast a creature spell that shares a type with our commander, we scry one. I want to mention, our commander shares creature types with itself, so every time we use Path of Ancestry to cast Sami, we're going to get that scry. Sami is a human artificer rogue. We have 4 humans, one of which is Sami, so that's 3 extra creatures. We have 5 artificers, in addition, Sami, which is 1, which is 4 other creatures, and Sami's our only rogue. So that is a total of 8 creatures, 8 cards in our deck. We'll get a scry off of this, including our commander. Seems pretty good. We are running, for more fixing, Spire of Industry. This is a land that comes in untapped, taps for colorless, or we can tap it and pay a life to add 1 mana of any color if we control an artifact, only if we control an artifact. So if we control an artifact, this is a pain land for either color we need. It is sort of a, what's the pain land? A Battlefield Forge? Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe a Battlefield Forge would be better than this, but this is on theme. We want to use this one. We also have Temple of the False God, which I think is a great card. Some people disagree, but for this level of deck, this sort of power level and budget, I think works for us. It taps for 2 colorless mana, but only if we have at least 4 other lands. So it's not a soul ring, it is a soul land, just not early game. Worth keeping for us, especially because we have so many cards that care about, that have an X in their cost or are just very expensive. We just want to remember that in our opening hand, if we have 2 or 3 lands and one of them's the Temple of the False God, maybe it's not the best keep. We are also running 2 soft fetches. One is Shire Terrace, which we can play and tap for colorless if we want to, or we can pay 1, tap, and sack it to Rampant Growth. It's sort of like an Evolving Wilds in that way, but it can come in, and even though we have to pay 1 to do the Evolving Wilds thing, we can also just play it as an untapped source of colorless. Finally, we have Myriad Landscape. It comes in tapped, and it taps for colorless, but once we have the mana for it, we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to go find 2 basics that share a land type, so either 2 plains or 2 forests. That means even though it's costing us some mana and it's taking a little time, Myriad Landscape is a land that turns into 2 lands, so it's ramp, just like Temple of the False God is. They're conditional, but ramp on our lands and our Boros deck is pretty good. Next, here's our Synergy land section. This is 7 lands that are artifact lands. So all of these are tapping for mana, but are also adding to our affinity total. Ancient Den, Darksteel Citadel, and Great Furnace are all doing that. They're artifact lands. Ancient Den taps for white, Great Furnace for red, and Darksteel Citadel for colorless, and it is indestructible. That's a nice bonus. If someone is going to do some, land destruction for us, they can't hit the Citadel. They also can't hit Rustvale Bridge, which is also indestructible, and it taps for red or white, but it enters tapped. So it's a tap land. It's pretty okay. And it adds to our affinity total, of course. We have Scene of the Crime, which is not just an artifact land, it's a clue. So it comes in tapped and taps for colorless. We can tap it and an untapped creature we control to add a mana of any color, or it's a clue. We can pay 2 and just sacrifice it without tapping it to draw a card, which means we can tap it for colorless mana and use that as one of the 2 we pay to sacrifice it and draw a card. If we need card draw, maybe it's worth it. We have Treasure Vault, which is an artifact land, comes in untapped, taps for colorless. We can pay X, tap and sack it to make that many treasure tokens. That's going to be a lot of mana, but we can probably make that happen. It's not reduced, of course, by affinity, like some of our X spells are, but we pump a lot of mana into this, and it becomes a bunch of treasures, which all add to affinity, so that may be worth it for us. Finally, we have Power Depot. Power Depot is a tap land, but it's an artifact land. it taps for colorless, or we can tap it for 1 mana of any color as long as we spend that mana on artifact spells or abilities of artifacts. And it also has modular 1. Now, what is modular? What is modular? So the rules for modular are an ability that says, since this is modular 1, it means that the power depot will enter with a 1/1 counter on it, and when the power depot is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, we can move that 1/1 counter to an artifact creature if we want. It's not really moving it, it's putting a counter on it for each counter that was on the power depot. It's just sort of a weird ability, and it's likely not to come up in this deck, although this is an artifact, and we have lots of ways to sacrifice our artifacts. We might be able to take them and just sack the power depot and put a counter on something if we really feel like it. Something else I do want to mention is that Earthshaker Titan can take all of these artifact lands and make them into 3/3 creatures. We'll just have to sacrifice them at the end of turn. That's pretty sweet for turning our lands into 3/3 creatures, which of course all will have haste and trample and melee. Finally, we have our utility section. Buried Ruin is an untapped land that taps for colorless. We can pay 2 and tap it and sack it to return an artifact from our graveyard to our hand. Good recursion. We've got lots of good artifacts we're probably going to want to bring back. Demolition Field is our, other than the Spine of Ishsa, I should say, our land destruction in the deck. I don't like to run a lot of it, but sometimes there's a non-basic that's really, in our hair. We might have a Rogue's Passage that the Earl the Miststalker player is using to come in unblockably. We might have a Mazavith that's stopping Sami from getting Ed. I have a friend that runs Glacial Chasm. I bring that up a lot in my videos. It's worth running Demolition Field for people like this. So for tapping it for colorless is a possibility. It's got that ability. But we can also pay 2, tap, and sack it to destroy a non-basic land that an opponent controls. They then get to search for a basic and put it on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. And then we get to do the same. So nobody is going down a land, we're just both going down a basic land and getting a basic, or we're going down a non-basic, I should say, and getting a basic to replace it, and it even comes in untapped. Rogue's Passage, I just mentioned. We don't have to be an Earl the Miststalker player to want this for our double striking commander. It comes in untapped, it taps for colorless, and we can pay for and tap it to make a creature unblockable this turn. Finally, we have Secluded Starforge from Edge of Eternities. It taps for colorless. We can pay 2 and tap it, and tap X untapped artifacts we control to give one of our creatures +X/+O until end of turn, but as a sorcery. So, with enough mana, imagine activating Rogue's Passage to make Sami unblockable, and then activating Secluded Starforge and tapping every artifact we have in play, which is going to be an enormous amount. Sami becomes a, let's make them a 12/4 double strike that's not blockable. It will then do 24 commander damage, and our opponent is just dead. We can only do this as a sorcery, but pretty great in our deck. And if we just have a lot of mana lying around because our affinity is enough to cast our huge spells, we can pay 5 and tap it to make Sami another friend, a 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token, which of course, again, adds to our affinity and to our theme. We want our robot friends. So, that sums it up. Again, I am, starting next Thursday, going to be releasing Spider-Man Commander decks every Thursday through mid-November when the Avatar set will drop. So if you want to see me build a specific Spider-Man card into a Commander deck, or tell me the style you'd like me to do that, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, please check out the video's description for my Edge of Eternities Commander decks playlist. Thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure, as always, to like and subscribe, and remember, magic is fun. You should play more Magic.